Heat up your frozen dinners, grab your TV tray, and settle in for another episode of the Plus Platoon, your podcast for all things Disney Plus, brought to you by Disney Plus fans. Watch along with us every week as we cover all the new, the old, the good, and the bad on Disney Plus. So put down that remote, don't touch that dial, and welcome your fabulous Plus Platoon host.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Plus Platoon. We're a Disney Plus fan podcast that gives honest, spoiler-filled reviews of movies and shows on Disney Plus. We look at new releases, coming attractions, and we'll even go back into the vault to revisit some of the classic Disney that's on the platform. Make sure you're subscribed and you will never miss a moment. Glad to be coming to you guys live this week. We're going to do this about once a month, and we're going to do it primarily with the season finales or show finales that we've got coming up. So I'm going to bring in my girl, Kate. Kate, how you doing this evening?
Good. Coming to you on location from a hotel room in Illinois. So
yeah, I'm coming to you guys on location from a condo in Florida. So it's travel week here.
It is travel week on the Platoon.
Because Sam is not with us because she's on the premiere cruise of The Wish. So it's travel week. Now, coming to you from Buffalo, which is where he's normally at, is Pete. Pete, how's it going this evening?
I could move a couple inches to my left or something like that, but otherwise I'm pretty much in my normal spot.
Okay. And because we are wrapping up a Marvel series, we do have our resident Marvel expert, Micah. Micah, glad to have you with us this evening.
Good to be back with you guys, and I wish I was with you guys in the cooler places because here in Kansas, it is hot.
Yep.
Yeah. Never thought I'd come to Florida to cool off.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
And we do have Steve with us tonight. Guys, if you're watching along, please let us know you're listening. So, as we usually do, Kate, we've got a little bit of Disney Plus news this week. What do we got going on?
Disney Plus news. It is time for the Disney Plus news. First up, Javier Bardem will be playing a villain in an upcoming MCU vehicle. Thoughts are that he will be playing Mr. Sinister, but nothing has been announced yet. Micah, do you want to tell us anything about Mr. Sinister?
Well, I think it's exciting that we're seeing Mr. Sinister because I think this leads into a little bit more that we're going to get the X-Men and mutants. He is a X-Men villain, has been since the very beginning. Most of his major outings in the Marvel Universe is against the X-Men. If people remember the Apocalypse movie with the X-Men, he's often paired with Apocalypse. And is another one of these, has been around for ages and ages and ages, and is actually a mutant clone in the current version, and his mind has been passed on from multiple clones. But he is another.
He's Palpatine.
Yeah, and looks about as good. Yes, typically.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so he is another sign, and I'm guessing they haven't announced it because it's hopefully a mutant movie that he'll be in. That's my thought.
Okay. And we're going to get into later the difference between mutants and Inhumans. We're going to talk about all of that because let me tell y'all what, Confused Kate is ready to show up in full force. But continuing with the Disney Plus news, Keanu Reeves is filming a new F1 docuseries for Disney Plus. It focuses on the 2009 season and the rapid rise to success of the Honda racing team. Many of the participants in the action will be involved.
Yeah, and I'm actually really looking forward to this one. Kate and I will say Glenn, who we've had on a couple times, is really looking forward to it. He's kind of my resident racing expert, but apparently a lot happens in the 2009 season that really changes how the Formula One races even occur today. So when this comes out, we will definitely have him on. He and I sat and talked for 20-30 minutes about it tonight even. He's really excited for this one.
Cool.
So it should be a lot of fun.
I love that. Up next, Bluey Season 3 will be coming to Disney+. This series out of the UK is very popular among young kids and will soon be available for the multiple screenings that toddlers are known for. I will say, a lot of my friends who are parents, they think Bluey is very funny for adults even. So A lot of people have said, listen, even if you don't have kids, go watch this because it's great.
Okay.
And last but certainly not least, Lightyear will be released on Disney Plus on August 3rd. This origin story of Buzz Lightyear has done okay in theaters, but has not made the traditional waves that a Pixar release typically has. And I'll be honest, I haven't seen it. I know Ryan, who's watching right now, has. So I will be interested to hear his thoughts on Lightyear. So,
Pete,
but
I
I
know
haven't
you.
heard great things about it.
I know you've seen Lightyear, and I
Yeah,
have
it
not.
was.
And
Yeah, I saw it. It was okay, I will say, and that's my 2-letter review.
And honestly, guys, we're probably going to watch it in the background. And if some of us end up liking it, we may end up throwing it a review. If not, we will throw a really short, to the point review on it after we've watched it. So,
and that is it for the Disney Plus news.
Yeah, not much this week.
Mm-mm.
Ryan says he's got to be honest. Hasn't seen a single episode of Miss Marvel. I think now that they're all available, I might just start. Ryan, if that's
we're
the
gonna
case,
spoil you, Ryan. Though.
Yeah, if that's the case, Ryan, you need to go away and watch us later. Listen to us later. Go
Yeah,
la
we're gonna
la la
spoil
la
all
la
of
for
it
the
for
next
you.
hour because we're going to spoil everything for you. So if you haven't seen it and really want to see it without any spoilers, now's the time to leave. If you don't mind the spoilers or you've already seen it, guys, we're going into the Miss Marvel finale. We've finally wrapped up the series, and it's real interesting to see how things go. Pete, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who ultimately was the villain of this series? And
oh no,
we are losing Pete. So Micah, I'm going to jump to you on this one then. We'll pick Pete back up when he comes back in. Got a couple options on the true villain for the series. What are your thoughts?
So I think there's sort of two that kind of play as the villains. The one is and I'm going to forget the organization name, the Department of
DODC,
Damage
Department
Control.
of Damage Control.
Yeah, Damage Control is often how they refer to them. So they, I think, in many ways play the more human bad guy. But then the what's the other group called?
The clandestines.
Yes, I think the clandestines. Now, I would separate out
Cameron.
Cameron. There we go. I'm struggling with the names today.
How am I giving the answers to these to Micah? I mean,
it's been a long, hot day. The brain ain't working.
That's fair.
So, but yeah, I think it definitely in that last episode, you are running from the Damage Control folks, and they, in many ways, are the bad guys that are surface level, but this tear could wipe out the whole world. And is Cameron going to reopen that? So he's put as sort of the ticking time bomb, but yet you're still trying to see him as human and trying to hopefully have him be redeemed, though he's the greatest threat. But I think the bad guys is the Damage Control. But Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in the end, it ended up being Damage Control was the biggest threat to Kamala and her friends. And I think Cameron obviously has some issues with the powers he's been given. And right, there's potentially, in a future movie or TV show, we could see him come back. And, he was, the one thing I read was he was using his powers to threaten and Kamala was using her powers to defend. So, they were a little different in that way, that he wasn't really so concerned about if he was going to hurt anybody, whereas she was not trying to hurt anybody. So, but in the end, he, didn't actually hurt anybody because of her efforts, and they kind of let him out. Derek has something he wants to say.
I was going to say he did hurt people. Did hurt people. He couldn't really hurt people because Kamala stopped him. But he was smashing cars. He was not going to be. He did hurt people. He just couldn't really, really hurt people but as far as him not actually hurting people, I can see him coming back as a villain later. Because him playing with Kamala's, emotions I can see with him, and I don't think that would necessarily have been on purpose in this show, but I could see him using it against her. I do not trust Cameron. And I think, Micah, that does go kind of ties in with the comics, doesn't it? Where Cameron is not necessarily trustworthy.
Right, and they made him a much nicer character in the TV show than what he ends up being in the comics. He ends up ultimately being one of the bad guys in the comics, but he didn't have the tear to the other realm. It didn't seem to be part of his power set in the comics, and he seems like if he loses it, he could rip open a tear and have the other realm come in, and that so. But I actually hope, and Marvel, please be listening to me when I say this, don't bring him back. He wasn't a good enough actor. So, and I actually don't enjoy him as a character. So he was good for the first season, but let's never see him again. There's more and better stuff to come.
Yeah,
I would
hopefully.
Now, Micah, you and I had a conversation, interesting, a little bit before the show, though, as far as the DODC and their treatment of the mosque and their treatment of, and just the treatment of the overall society's treatment of the Muslim individuals that were in this show, and how it's tied to today's society, and how today's society is, and I would argue more so early 2000s.
Yeah.
With the scapegoat that the Muslim society has been made of, something goes wrong, well, they're your first suspects. And it was huge after 9/11. And it was, because there were, you went on a plane and there were people who, if someone looked different or talked different, well, they must be the terrorists and you need to get them off my plane. And I saw that firsthand. So, but yeah, Micah, how they invaded the mosque. I thought one of the funnier things was when, Kamala's friend.
Yeah, hang on, give me a minute. I'll pull.
Don't ask me. Kate doesn't know.
Anyway, Kamala's friend,
Nakia.
Yeah, she was, no, you can't go in there until okay, but fine. And it's this completely other guy.
Yeah.
So,
and the scene with the shoes, not respecting it and coming in with the shoes, and we saw that in an earlier episode, and it was like, okay, what's the DODC going to do when they come back? And what do? They march straight in with their shoes, and they made an effort to showing, look, here they are. But I also loved the people in the mosque. What did they do? They had their IDs ready. It was like, yeah, we're used to this. This is unfortunately the treatment we get. And also the comment that Nakia said at one point when they were like, oh, but it's safe to come to a mosque. And she's like, this is a mosque in America. No, it's not safe. Everybody's looking at us. And I was like, oh, ouch. Bit of political commentary there.
And I love the Abraham Lincoln quote she threw at him.
Yes.
Or no, the imam threw at him.
Yes.
Okay. Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Micah said about going back to the villain. He put it so well with, or at least I think it was one of these two jokers down here. I don't remember which one it was. That the DODC was the human villain. That was the villain that hits at our humanity. That hits on what the Islamic community faces regularly, and it's unfortunate and it's unfair and it's not okay, but that hit from the humanity side. And then, but before I really thought about it, and before Micah said this, I was like, oh, the clandestines, they're like the jinns, they're the ones who are the bad guys, obviously, because if they hadn't come back and did all this stuff, nothing would have happened. But I don't think that's, after Micah said that, I think it was Micah said that, I was like, oh, that's a really good point, that you have the mystic side and then the human side, and they're both important in this.
Yeah. And it's very common in Marvel for some portion of the government to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Whether it's Hydra as part of the government, or it's just, you know, these
Or
different Sword was, you know, at one point in WandaVision was kind of portrayed as the bad. I mean, there's people in the government that are shown as overstepping their bounds, and that kind of, even in this last episode, is what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to remember the name of the character, but the guy that was back at headquarters was like telling the woman there in charge, stand down, stand down, stand down. She went and did it anyways. And, you know, it does feel very, you know, our society, parts of our society right now, and the mistrust of the law enforcement, let's say.
Which, did that remind anyone else of Ocean's 12 with you know, the don't do it, you refuse it, and she what is her name? Catherine Zeta-Jones' character goes in and forges the signature anyway and calls in all these police.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Right.
that's what it reminded me a little bit of. So don't do it, and she brings in everybody. Steve does say there was no true real villain. One of the things he was disappointed in. Steve, I'm kind of with you on that one. It was one of the things I was disappointed in. And he says hearing Micah's comment makes him think the nicer version is Cam is why they feel there was no real villain. Cameron, I think Cameron and Micah, you can maybe back up. Cameron easily could have been a true villain in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he and his mother, I think, in the early comics, are much more the villains. They really humanized him in this, where in the comics he doesn't end well. In this one, they've left it open much better.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think they were kind of wishy-washy with that, in that, like, they kind of made him bad, because like he had that moment with Kamala where they like hold hands or whatever, and then after that he starts doing, we'll say, bad things, but he's not really a villain. So they kind of wishy-washed it to me. They wanted to show him in a slightly worse light than her, but didn't want to actually make him a bad guy. And I don't know. I do agree that it was probably one of the flaws of this show. What I will say they did well is, like, some of these Marvel shows, there's like 7 villains, and I sometimes get sick of that it's like, okay, we need a few,
to go to no villains
here. but yeah, here I think the villains weren't, they only had really the 2 villains. But I don't think either of them were very strong. I think the I keep forgetting what they're called. The clandestines, I think, were the stronger villain, but they basically eliminated them. They showed up in the end of the 2nd episode and eliminated them in the 5th. So they were like hardly villains. And I don't know. It didn't quite work.
Nick is with us as Jazz Vox Events, says Muslims or Bob Chapek, current go-to villain options. Was not aware of Bob Chapek, current head of the Walt Disney Company. And Steve says agrees there were bad people, but no Marvel villain. Yeah, I'd buy in with that as well. Okay.
Though,
next.
If you know her early series, her villain, I'm glad they steered away from the pigeon guy, the inventor.
The inventor.
So that saved us, I think. But anyway, let's move on.
Okay. So the next thing, and actually, Micah, I'm going to go with you. Her powers evolve over the course of the series and I would argue they evolve, but maybe it's more she knows how to control them a little bit more, because in the opening, her hand gets really big and it goes out and saves the social media girl, and all that kind of stuff does happen as well. So can you kind of talk, Micah? I guess my question is how they by the end of the series, how do they compare to the comics versus at the beginning? And, how her powers evolved compared to some of these source stories.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was a lot of fans that were upset with the change in her power set, but we finally get in the last episode her looking like what she does in all of the comics. And the key line is when she's behind the cars and they're shooting at her, and she says "embiggen," and that's the language that they use of she embiggens her hands or her legs or her head. Or so we got to finally see her in as if she was in her comic form. And Kamran uses his powers like a power blast kind of thing, but she uses it as embiggening herself. And so we got to see her, be the big hand smash on the truck and have big legs. And that, for those of us who have read the comics, it's like, oh, we're finally getting to see Miss Marvel the way she normally fights. I'm curious to see if they keep that as more of how she uses her abilities moving forward. But with the power set and Kamran's power set, it looked like they took the two of them and said, we need to figure out a way to make them as if they were together, and took two characters that had very different power sets and kind of split the difference. And that's how they came up with both their power sets.
What was Cameron's power in the comics?
Oh, no. I think it's energy projection. Energy.
Okay.
He can shoot energy. So similar to
So
what
more
he's
like
doing.
he does.
Yeah, more like he does. But it looks like hers. So I think they were trying to make the two of them look like they were the same.
Is that to try and kind of make some kind of a connection between the two? Maybe?
Well, that their power comes from the same thing, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Though we see at that end scene, I think we're going to come to this with, is she a mutant? And is hers different? But with the power set, that I think is interesting, because I think that is part of the evolution of what she is, trying to figure out who she is, and how her power set works. I think having it more energy based and more on Kree tech, which I think is sort of subtly in the background of this.
Whoa. You just hit, I'm sure if you go into it, you'll hit confused Kate. So let's go there. What do you mean by her powers going to Kree tech?
So in the, is it the second or the third episode when they find the bangle?
The blue arm.
Is, well, I right away was like, oh yay, the Kree. Oops, here I'm whacking my mic. The Kree are blue mostly, and we saw that with Captain Marvel, the Kree who she thinks she's one of the Kree for a while. Often they're blue. The band, there is the original in the comics, the original Captain Marvel was Kree, and he had these two bands. I think they called them negative bands. And I think that her bangle is one of those two.
And we'll get to the end scene here in a little bit.
Yeah, we won't jump there. But that, I think, ties and is going to tie into the new movie of the Marvels. And I've lost Kate.
Kate, just nod and smile.
No. I'm trying to remember the Kree. There's a Kree in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was the bad guy.
Yes.
And his name is
the
Ronan.
Ronan. Thank you.
Yes, the Accuser. Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah. But the Kree are also the bad guys in the Captain Marvel movie.
Yes.
Even though originally Carol Danvers is working with them, but we find out as the movie goes on that they're
right.
bad guys.
Well,
the other thing I wanted to mention in that same scene where they found the bangle, one of the shots is from above, and it also has the symbol of the 10 rings, which we also are starting to think are also like Kree power items.
Kree tech, yep.
Similar to the bangle and the 10. I mean, if you think about them, they kind of do the same thing, right? Bangle, you wear it on your wrist. 10 rings, you wear them on your wrist. So I think that's, there's been a lot of complaints about phase 4 being disjointed, but if there's any kind of through line in phase 4 that we're starting this, I think this show maybe lets us start to see that the Kree tech is the through line that might be coming to phase 4, and I think that's where we're going to get to.
And now I did see something, and Kate, we'll get to you in just a second as you're scratching your nose. That when they actually did an interview with Kevin Feige, and he said that phase 4's main point up to now is that it is so different, and being different from everything they've done before so far is actually phase 4's the idea behind phase 4. And yeah, Gina says her mind is officially blown. At least I'm assuming that's what that emoji means.
I can't tell if she's doing this or if she's.
Is Thanos a Kree? What was
No,
Thanos?
No, he's a Titan.
Titan.
He's a
Yeah.
Titan.
He's Titan.
Okay.
Okay.
So he's from Tennessee.
And oh, wow. Oh.
That was really good.
Now my question, and the thing is though, we've got Secret Invasion coming up. So those are going to be the Skrulls infiltrating everywhere. Okay, you know who
so that also happened in Miss Marvel. So you know in
Do you remember
Miss
who the
Marvel,
Skrulls are?
The Skrulls were the green guys in Miss
The green
Marvel
people.
that seemed like the good guys.
Yeah.
They're not. Sorry, spoiler alert, but we are full of spoilers. Secret Invasion, the Skrulls who are, Nick Fury's in theory working with and all this are not good guys.
Perfect.
So who knows about the Kree?
So
In
the big thing is the humans are stuck between two warring races, which is the Kree and the
Skrulls.
Skrulls. Yes, sorry. Yeah, lost their name. And humans get stuck in the middle of that conflict and often get the raw end of the deal. Either side's trying to take over the Earth.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean we're getting very much in the weeds of the entire MCU versus just this show, right?
Yeah.
Well, but
none of that is in the show, but at the end of the show, we and something that came as
we'll get there, Pete. We'll get there, Pete. Okay. And Steve says agrees probably with me. I'm guessing is better using and understanding her powers. I can see that, how she, as it goes on, because then you can see Cameron doesn't really understand how to use his powers in the last episode because he just got them. But I'm not sure I buy that because he knew to shoot it at, he knew he had powers because he knew to shoot it at that drone that was following them.
Yeah,
and how
you think about the train scene, he doesn't mean to disrail the train. He
but
derails
how did he
the
know
train.
to shoot the drone? But how did he know to shoot the drone if he didn't know he actually did have powers? I mean, could that be a continuity error or something deeper? So
I think it's you threaten a bear and the bear strikes out, and it's that same kind of thing. You threaten him and he just responds, and it's like, oh, look how I responded. And often in superhero things that fits with they don't know until they're threatened and suddenly their power comes out.
I get that. Kind of like Kamala.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of Kamala, guys, Kamala was very much featured, but there were a lot of great characters in this. And this is really one where we really want to hear from our audience. But Kate, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who was your favorite non-Kamala character in this series?
Well, listen, I'm not pointing fingers or anything. Pointing at you two. But my two favorite characters were already taken when I decided to look at the list. So my third favorite character was Nakia. I love how they portrayed Nakia. I love her bravery in running for the council or the board. I can't remember the exact term. In a very male-dominated religion. I love how she stood up for the mosque, even saying in everything she did. I love her very real interaction with Kamala in I am your best friend. You can keep secrets from everyone else. You don't keep secrets from me. Because if I found out that my very best friend, Missy, if she didn't tell me this crazy secret, I'd be like, excuse me, when you say I'm not going to tell anybody, that's not including me. You tell me everything. So I love even I think it was Micah again that said or maybe I don't know which one of you jokers it was, but said we brought him they can't come into a mosque. It's a place of prayer. And she's like, we're in America. You need to go to the high school. That's the emptiest place on a Saturday. That was
and even then it wasn't. And even then it wasn't.
I know. But and it took me a little bit to warm up to her. because I wasn't entirely sure. I mean, going into Marvel series, literally trust no one because somebody like is like the best character ever, and then you're like, oh wait, you're the actual worst. So it took me a little bit to warm up to her, but yeah, I love the way they wrote her. I thought the actress did a wonderful job portraying her. Big fan. So, Micah, what about you?
Well, since she was taken and many of the others weren't, there's actually three
Right?
little characters that I loved. I loved the um now I'm not quite sure the proper term. A mom, the
Yeah, the
lead
mom.
at
Yeah.
the mosque. He is just a fantastic character. He had some of the best lines in the whole thing. But I also love some of the other Muslim characters that are there. The little boy who's stealing the shoes and falls off, and some of his little things of the posts that he does. But I also love the
Ice
guy
cream
and
pizza.
yeah, well, he says that, and then the guy who's the sandwich maker, who says, "Oh, ice cream pizza." I thought the three of those characters just added some really good, fun life, but very realness to the world. So I loved those three.
I like those.
I will
So
just add one thing with Nakia. I loved in the trailers at the end when it was going through and it talked about the changes here, but the first part, the her of here, was a different color, and that's talking about her. That the change is her and talking about Nakia. And I thought, oh, what a great thing to add in.
yeah, and that's funny that you, Kate. I didn't think anyone would think of Yusuf, who is
Oh, the dad.
Kamala's
God.
dad, but I had to take him because as a dad of a teenage daughter that doesn't have superpowers, but like I see a lot of Kamala in my daughter, at least in terms of like she's very artistic and things like that. That I think that was a character I identified with, but he was a very loving parent, and I mean, I don't know, almost everything shows dads as like doofuses, and he had his doofus moments, but I really liked just the way he treated her with respect.
Well, and how many Marvel shows don't have two valid parents?
Right.
Especially dads.
Well, and that was something I liked about this show that we don't normally see, which is parents that know that know the kid is a superhero. Right.
And
we had and trust them, right. But I really enjoyed him, especially that last scene where he kind of dubbed her Miss Marvel. And I don't know if you noticed at the end, she goes off, and you can see her steps reflecting in his glasses, and he's going, "Oh, it's magic." And that was such a perfect moment. I really just liked that character a lot, even though he wasn't probably as important as the mom, and she was very good too. I really liked him.
I saw him as the one who would willing to do absolutely anything for his daughter, including dress up as the Hulk.
Yeah, right.
So good.
Well, I thought it was perfect that between the two of them, they give her outfit and they name her. And they were building to that through the whole series. I don't know if people noticed that, but there kept being cloth given to Kamala.
Right.
And all of those pieces then ended up being her suit at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, guys, my favorite character, I know we're not supposed to talk about him, but I got to go with Bruno. I got to go with Bruno. There is a soft place in my heart for guys who are friend zoned with someone that they absolutely adore. Because, guys, I know a couple of the platooners know, guys, I lived that. That was me and my current wife. I was totally friend zoned, and he's doing everything he can to help her as his best friend, because the other girl may be Kamala's best friend, but she is his best friend, and she is his best friend by far. And as someone who has had a female best friend who they desperately want to get out of the friend zone, I mean, the look on his face when he sees the two of them, her and Cameron, about to kiss, broke my heart. Just as oh my gosh, I have totally been in that situation. Not necessarily seeing the girl about to kiss someone, but just as a, oh my gosh, what can I do to get out of this? And that's why I really hope Cameron is the bad guy and Cameron comes back to be completely purely evil, because I'm Team Bruno. I'm Team Bruno all the way on this one. So it's one of those where, I mean, Cameron could be evil. I don't think. Now, it does seem a little, as much as I hate to say it, High School Musical, the series of sending one of the people away, like halfway across the country or across the country, because they did that and that also. And I mean, I know Marvel never steals anything, but it's one of those where I am completely on Team Bruno on this one. So, okay. Now, probably the biggest point in this, and Micah, I know you and I actually kind of called this a little bit from the beginning. We've got mutants coming. We've got the X-Men coming. And so I'm going to kind of let you go into this as far as like, how do we, is she a mutant in the comics? How do we know it's going to be the X-Men? What were some of the clues and what are some of the outright explicit things that are done to make sure that we know she's a mutant and the X-Men are coming?
So I actually was doing some research on the Inhumans, which she started off as an Inhuman in the comics, and the Inhumans were brought about, and I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the Marvel people said, we need to do something other than just the X-Men, and paused the X-Men and brought about a different type of mutant, which was the Inhumans. So in some ways, this is saying, well, Inhuman or mutant, it doesn't really matter. We see we hear a couple of really big clues. If you've watched, and you guys are going to deal with this next week, the Doctor Strange, something multiverse, madness of the
multiverse of madness. Yeah,
that's it. I'm getting my name mixed up. When Professor X first rolls out, in the background, the music that's playing there is the theme song from the X-Men from the 90s cartoon. That same music plays just as he is saying to her, I think that you have a mutation. And that same music plays. When that happened, it was just sort of this, whoa, they're bringing in, and all of us fans went nuts. It's the first time they've actually used the language of mutant or mutation. And that link that's the music that was there is such a clue that, it's the X-Men. So I think those are the biggest clues that we have. Whether she was basically everybody who was an Inhuman had a mutation and are in a way a mutant. They're triggered by the Terrigen mist, but they're a mutant who's triggered with that. So I think it's interesting. Well, let me put it this way. Her line there, right after that scene, and he says, you're a mutation. There's this pause, that music plays, and then she says, it's just another label.
Right.
Which I was sort of like, oh, that's a good slap in the face to all the fans when you're like, is she a mutant? Is she an Inhuman? Hey, it's just another label, and we're bringing them to you. And it's like, whoa, okay. So I don't know if that's quite what you were looking for, Derek, but yeah, I think that's a big clue that we've got the X-Men coming, we've got mutants coming.
Yeah, I think we knew, and I think that's a big part of it is back with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and also there was actually a very short-lived show called Inhumans. When they didn't own the rights to the X-Men because of Fox, they were pushing very hard on the Inhumans as their version of the mutants, even though Inhumans were never particularly popular. But I think now that they have the rights to the mutants, now they're going, oh yeah, let's call them all mutants so that we can bring the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe
and have less confused kids when we have too many different groups.
Yeah, and I think even in WandaVision, there was a point in WandaVision where they said something about her having a mutant gene or something like that. So, or maybe it didn't use the word mutants, but like implied it. So,
Okay,
Kate,
so for those of us that tend to get confused easily, an
Who could that be?
inhuman, an inhuman is someone who went through Terrigenesis, who either went through the Terrigenesis mist
right?
or whatever. That someone who was an actual human being
Right.
and went through Terrigenesis. A mutant is not human, was never human.
Oh, well,
Well,
there's the distinction there that you're making that's a little.
Yeah.
So mutants
mu-
are humans who have a mutated gene, the X gene. The
Right.
thing within humans, they're very, very similar. When regular humans who don't have the mutation go through Terrigen Mist, it kills them. But for those who have this other mutation, the Terrigen Mist mutates them further and they become Inhumans. So it's a
Yeah.
fine thing. They're both humans with a mutation. The one is triggered by puberty. The other one's triggered by Terrigen Mist.
So, and I understand this is gonna so
So
Captain
basically,
go with it.
Marvel, Captain Marvel
Mhm.
is not human. She's kind of like Superman, right? Where she's like,
No, she's
she
human.
was
She's
she
human.
was a human that was hit by the Power Stone, right?
Oh,
yeah,
right.
it's the
okay. So I'm gonna jump universes here. I'm gonna jump over to DC and say Superman. Would Superman be considered a mutant?
he's an alien.
No, because he's an alien.
So
He's from another planet.
aliens. So aliens
The Kree and Skrull are not mutants.
are not
Yeah.
mutants.
They're human.
Right.
They're
Mutants.
They're aliens.
Can you be born with that? Can you be born a mutant, or does something have to happen to you to become a mutant?
So I think the theory behind X-Men and the mutants is that you are born with this extra gene. So it's a genetic anomaly, which is why they're called. That's why they say they're
Kind of like how
mutants.
aren't Down syndrome kids born with an extra chromosome or something like that? Am I totally wrong on that?
Well, one's fictional, one's real, but yeah,
Well, no,
maybe
I know,
other
but
than
that's
that,
I'm
they're very
they both
similar.
have superpowers.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you could say it's similar in a way.
Okay.
And in truth, let's get with the reality of it. Whatever turns them into what they are, they're kind of the same group of people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
they're different people, but it's like it gives them some kind of extra power. And the X-Men and the Inhumans, some of them have the same powers and everything. So
yeah, and in many ways they're born with it versus someone like Spider-Man, who we have an origin story of he's bitten and that's where he gets his power, or
Got
the
it.
Hulk, he gets blasted with this, or Captain Marvel, she gets blasted with power and she gets her abilities.
Got
But
it.
both the Inhumans and the mutants, they're born with those mutated genes.
Okay,
Okay.
so this is setting up that Miss Marvel has been born with this.
Yes,
Yes.
Miss Marvel
Yes.
was,
Yes.
and that's the reason why the bangle affects her differently. Like her ancestor, the clandestines, when they clipped it on, it did affect them, but they couldn't use powers. And her grandmother, it affected her, but she didn't have powers. But something's mutated about Kamala, so she's a mutant, and the bangle triggers that mutation in a way.
And did the feeling we got was from Dad? Or do we know?
I don't think we got an impression.
Okay.
I didn't. Yeah.
And
one
I
thing
don't think X-Men ever really defines where the mutation comes from, though you can sometimes get it from your parents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Children of
Okay.
mutants are also mutants usually, but I think, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think X-Men particularly defines how it happens.
Not in any of the lore that I've read. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the last thing we see in this is we see Miss Marvel will return in The Marvels, which we know is a movie that is coming out next in 2023. Okay. In the mid-credits scene, we see Captain Marvel. We see her show up. We see Kamala basically get blasted through the wall, her door, and out and then in through her door comes Brie Danvers as Captain Marvel. So, one question I've seen that people are posting online is, who is it really at the end? And the reason I'm posting this and posing this question is because, Micah, correct me if I'm wrong, in the comics, the first thing that Miss Marvel does, since she can do shape-shifting, is she shows up as Brie Danvers as Captain Marvel when she commits her first heroic act. Am I correct on that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And then a big part of the story is her taking her own face as a superhero because she can.
Right.
Yeah, she doesn't have to look like someone else to be a superpower.
But the impression I got, the impression that I've seen mostly online, but the impression I got is that is actually Carol Danvers going, what kind of super fan freak show have I shown up in? So,
well,
and-
it definitely, I rewatched it a couple times, and she like looks around the room and then she goes, oh, no, right? She's not looking in a mirror and doing that. If it was still Kamala in Brie Larson's body,
she doesn't know she's Brie Larson.
Right. She would have had to have looked in a mirror and seen herself, but she didn't do that. She just looked at all the posters. She wouldn't have gone,
no. She would have been so super excited. She's such a fangirl. She would have been like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. But the fact that she went, no. Does she know what's going on already?
I think so. I think she's actually.
So, Michael, what's going on? Help me out. What's going on?
What? I could be totally off on this, but I think what's happened is the two have switched places because each of them has touched one of the I think they're called negative bands. Basically the bangle. I'm guessing that Captain Marvel was probably in the negative zone, which that's complicated. It's a bad place in another realm. And grabbed
have we seen that at all? Because you and I talked about how maybe we've seen okay, but what about in that first episode?
Possibly that could have been and people also talk about the Nor zone, where their people was that where she came from? Like when the bangle first activated, it never fully explained where she fell back into. That could be the negative zone. My guess is that this is now the two bands are reacting, and that wherever Captain Marvel was, she was in a tight spot, might have touched the other one, and now suddenly switches and is like, oh crap, now I've sent a fan of mine into a very dangerous spot. That's my guess.
Because right before she shows up, Kamala's band does something weird that she's never seen before, and she doesn't know what's going on, and all of a sudden she gets blasted through this door.
And she didn't activate it. It just happened. So my guess is the person who was touching the other one, Captain Marvel, she triggered something, and that caused the switch.
And I'm hoping we see that at some point.
I wonder if what we saw, because sometimes they do this with the end credit scenes. I wonder if we saw a scene from the Marvels movie.
I can see that.
Yep.
Because obviously we know both those characters are in it. And I wonder if it's a scene that happens, 20 minutes, half hour into the movie that brings Kamala Khan into the plot of that movie.
Because we know she is going to be a fairly major part of that plot.
Yeah.
Now, and that brings another part, because we've got Miss Marvel, we've got Captain Marvel, and we've got Monica Rambeau. And how we know all three of those are going to be the Marvels. Those three are the Marvel. Who's your fourth?
They've hinted at that Nova will be there, and Nova is a new character we've seen in Guardians of the Galaxy. The Nova Core. That's the word. I was going to say Nova Force, and I knew that wasn't right. The Nova Core, and they kind of made them sort of a funny group in some ways. But there's two different characters that actually go by the name Nova, and one of them is linked with Miss Marvel in the comics. And they've hinted at that he's the fourth character in that, or that a Nova will be the fourth one.
Okay, But I was just thinking about, their powers are all very, very similar. They're all dealing with light, energy. I know Monica Rambeau doesn't really have a chance to explore her powers all that much in WandaVision. That's where kind of we saw her get her powers, is her going through the hex. But it's going to be really interesting to see how at least those three, and if not the fourth, will show up in the Marvels. And my thought is, where do we go in this movie? And I think it's going to be real interesting to see if it comes out before or after Secret Invasion, and when Secret Invasion comes out. Because I think if Secret Invasion comes out in the spring, then the Marvels may actually be the way to help start wrapping up that battle. I think because I think those two are going to, with the Krees and the Skrulls and everybody, I think those two are going to be really, really closely tied. It's going to be really important which order those two come out in.
So I think the Marvels is coming out in spring, right?
June. I think it's their June release.
Is it?
July 28th. Yeah.
July 28th. Yeah.
And I don't think we have a release date for Secret Invasion yet.
Because we don't have a release date for anything beyond She-Hulk.
Right.
Which there's ties to She-Hulk with the damage control, because they'll show up again in She-Hulk.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so I
think
think
be a lawyer going against damage control then,
or working as part of the same, like the one scene from the trailers of She-Hulk is sort of at the headquarters of damage control, and it's not it doesn't quite make it clear whether she's working for them or she's just there to represent somebody, but she'll be representing superheroes, so maybe working for them or against them, but in connection with them.
Yeah. I mean, we have a pretty good idea of the time of the release timeline for the movies, but we don't have a very good idea on the release timeline of the shows. I'm guessing we're going to hear an awful lot in the next 2 months.
And I'm guessing on Disney Plus Day, I think they'll show a lot of when those are going to be coming out. So, and we will have a special live show that night. Kate and I will be going over lots of Disney Plus news like we did last year.
I'm not included.
Well, we'll see.
You can join.
You can join us. Yeah. Remember you and Sam were in the background heckling us last year.
That's true. Yeah, I could just do that.
But remember Secret Invasion, we saw, I think a couple weeks ago, we announced they're doing like months of reshoots. So it's almost like there's big changes happening from the original idea. So guys, any other thoughts, any other main ideas on the series? Pete, I'll start with you, but as far as anything else you want to bring up?
So we're not doing Pixie Dust quite yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay. So my biggest thought was I'm glad that the last episode pulled back to New York, and while I found the stuff that happened in Karachi very interesting, it was kind of the most boring stuff of the show. I thought it dragged on a little long. So did I say that right? Karachi?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really enjoyed this final episode. It brought it back to, the teenage life that she had in New York, which was really what I was enjoying about the show, and the interaction with her family and with her mosque and with her friends and everything like that. So last week I was saying I wasn't loving the show that much. I really enjoyed it a lot more with this final episode. And so those parts of it worked really well for me. And I wish the middle the middle part was a little tighter, I guess. So, but that's my main thought for the last episode.
I mean, for me, this is 2 shows in a row that we've had that the last episode is what we all hoped that the series would be.
You're talking about Obi-Wan?
Obi-Wan. Yeah, I'm tying it into Obi-Wan. I think that, and part of the reason is the people who directed the first episode, this is the only other episode they directed, was the last episode. So it's almost like the middle stuff was a little bit, was different, was whatever, because but this is one of those where the last episode is, I would again argue, is probably the best episode of the series.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, guys, this is another one that could have been a movie instead of a series. So, Kate?
I enjoyed it. I think what I enjoyed most was just who Kamala is, and the actress that portrayed her nailed it. I also loved, especially, I feel like it was most prominent in the very first episode, how they just the cinematography of it and how they like portrayed text
animations.
messages and yeah, just that was so brilliant. How they did that, just the cinematography and the choices made from a visual standpoint, loved that. Yeah, there were things that were hard to pick up if you aren't a diehard Marvel fan, even though I am a pretty big Marvel fan, especially since I've been working my way through the series. But like the mutant thing went over my head. Other stuff kind of went over my head. That's what happens when you send emails while also watching the show. But overall, I liked it. I don't know. I don't really know what I want to see from more in the future. I don't have any. I don't know. I don't have any big goals for the future. So, Micah?
One of the things that I have to recognize with this show, I liked it, but I realize I am not the target audience. I'm a white male who's 40. I am not the target audience.
None of us are. Honestly, no offense,
yeah.
Kate, you're a little too old.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
My daughter, who is 16, this is the first Marvel show that she has watched with us that she stayed with. Like, I've been trying to show the Marvel shows to my kids. My son is right there with me. My daughter takes maybe 10 minutes and is like, yeah, I can go do something else. This one, she was like, boom, she was hooked. She was there. She watched them. She liked it. It's the
What'd
first
your
one.
son think of it?
He didn't mind it, but it was my wife and my daughter that really, they watched it and they enjoyed it in a way that I couldn't get them into other shows. So I think in some ways I recognize I'm not the right target audience for this one. And I think for the target audience that it was aiming for, it hit it. It hit the nail.
Yeah.
So I think I've enjoyed other shows more because like Moon Knight, that was more targeted towards guys like me. This one was targeted to young women, and I think it was perfect for that. And the way it was filmed, the content, even the bad guys, that there was less action and more relationship stuff, and my daughter loved that. So I think for its target audience, it worked.
And yeah, Nick says, always happy to see generations of strong women portrayed. Totally agree with that, Nick. Totally
Amen.
agree that, yeah. So, as we always do, Pixie Dust rating out of 5 for the season. Kate?
I'll give it a 3.
I think
Okay.
Go ahead, Micah.
I was going to say, I would give it a very close to that 3. I would say 3.5, just because I'm thinking about how it affected my family, not necessarily just me.
Yeah, I went back and I looked at how I rated the other series, and I kind of put this in those rankings, and it was right where I was thinking I was going to rate it, which is a 3.5. It's not my favorite of the series, but it's higher than a couple of them, so it's kind of in the middle. And I would definitely revisit some of the episodes. As I said, I don't know about the ones in the middle, but I really enjoyed the first episode and the last episode a lot, and so I think that brought it up. I think if you had asked me last week, it would have been a lower rating, but this week it's a 3.5. Derek?
And I'll agree that last week it would have been a lower rating. I owe an apology to Loki. I didn't think other series could do this much talking and not do anything as it did. Guys, it's a 1.5 for me. It was not a good series.
Wow, really?
No, really. It was that I was that bored. It was that I never again. Now,
I don't know how you made through it at that rating.
And it's only a 1.5 because of the last episode. Otherwise, it would have tied Loki at a 1. So,
wow.
Yeah. Now,
wow.
And Steve says he gives it a 3. But next week, we are the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Now, Pete, I have seen exactly one Avengers movie, The Avengers, and I've seen the series we've talked about so far. What do I need to know for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness?
So I think this is not as bad as some Marvel movies in terms of what you need to know, but I just put together a little bit about 2 of the characters, which I think are most important. One of them is, of course, the lead character, Dr. Stephen Strange. in his original, he's had 5 appearances before this in Marvel movies, though one of them was a very small role in Ragnarok. He started out as his role was he was a brilliant surgeon who was also, of course, very arrogant, because aren't they all? And he was in love with Dr. Christine Palmer, but she broke up with him because of his arrogance. He gets into a bad car accident, which basically ruins his hands, and he can no longer be a surgeon. And he goes through all this quest to find a cure, and he ends up in Karmantaj in Tibet, where he learns the mystic arts from the Ancient One. And in doing so, he becomes a powerful wizard and ends up saving the world a couple of times throughout his throughout the movies that he's in. But he's
Does this sound like a whole lot like the Christian Bale Batman to anyone else?
I don't think he's quite as arrogant as Stephen Strange is, and of course, Batman doesn't have magical any superpowers. So, I mean, Stephen Strange is one of the more powerful characters in the Marvel universe, I'd say. And the last time we saw him was dealing with Peter Parker and his friends in No Way Home. But honestly, you do not need to know anything about No Way Home for this movie, even though both deal with the multiverse. Wanda is probably the one that is harder to, without knowing her backstory, this movie probably wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
She has been in 6 previous appearances, including, of course, WandaVision. She started out as a creation of Hydra with her and her brother, and she originally had very telekinetic and telepathic powers. Her first major appearance, she was in a teaser at the end of, I think, Winter Soldier. She was just in the teaser clip. But in Age of Ultron, she was initially a weapon of Hydra, but then she went to work. Her and her brother went to work from Ultron, and she used her mind control powers to kind of mess with all the Avengers. And it's interesting that whole mind control thing, Micah, and maybe you can comment on this, that kind of dropped until, I guess, maybe WandaVision. She started controlling people's minds again, but they didn't really do much with the mind control, and it was more the telekinesis. But then she ended up eventually switching sides to the Avengers when she found out Ultron wanted to kill all the humans, and her and her brother fought with the Avengers, and her brother is killed by Ultron in that fight. And then later in Civil War, her actions create an accident that lead to the Sokovia Accords, which is basically a set of agreements which try to control and monitor superpowered people. She also falls in love with Vision, and then she essentially has to kill him in Infinity War, and then Thanos ends up bringing him back and killing him again. And then we next see her in WandaVision, and Derek, you've seen WandaVision, so yes, you're aware.
And I loved WandaVision.
Yeah, so the most important stuff from her for this movie came out of WandaVision, which is that in WandaVision she creates this world for herself, and in this world, Vision is still alive, and also she has children. She has a family. And by the end of WandaVision, we see that she gives those things back up in order to basically release all these people that she has controlled and everything like that. And I guess to defeat Agatha as well. But at the same time, she gets a hold of the Darkhold, which is a book of dark magic. And the last thing we see of Wanda at the end of WandaVision is her reading the Darkhold and hearing her children. And of course, this
yelling
is going
for
to
help.
be, yes. So this is going to be very important for this movie.
Okay. Now, Pete, what do I need to know from What If for this movie? Anything?
Nothing. I'll be quite honest. There was an episode of What If with Doctor Strange, and there were some episodes with Wanda. You do not need to see those. Okay. They really do not relate at all. I mean, there's similarities.
Well, there's a couple of characters that are in there. So like when you're in the other universe and you see the Captain Carter,
Kelsey Card,
she's in
yeah.
it, but
Okay.
you don't need to actually see it beforehand. There are other connections.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
one connection that Marvel I think is downplaying is the Darkhold is one of the major plot points for Agents of Shield. But
Right.
we're not going to mention Agents of Shield because they don't like
Right.
it anymore. But
If you thought we didn't talk about Bruno, we really don't talk about Agents of Shield.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because
okay,
they got Inhumans, which we don't talk about, and they got the Darkhold, which we don't talk about, except now I already saw this movie. I think Derek and Kate, you haven't seen it yet, right? So we'll be talking about it next week. But so if anybody wants to, anyone that hasn't seen the 100 and some hours of Marvel material that's out there, I think my summary is enough that you can step into this movie without too much trouble, because
I'm going into this blind. You guys know how
Yeah.
much I haven't seen. So
yeah, there's very little. I mean, it's again, it all connects kind of, but I don't think. I think the best thing is really WandaVision. I think that's the most important thing. The rest of it is just kind of, yeah. I mean, Doctor Strange is a powerful wizard, and he does lots of magic by doing this. Whereas Wanda does lots of magic by doing this. They're kind of similar that way.
I look forward to it.
Yep.
Yeah, not sure I'd go to look forward to it, but definitely going to be doing that next week. Guys, if you have suggestions on things we should still watch, we've got Marvel next week, but then we've also got a couple of non-Marvel shows that I'm actually looking really forward to. But if you have suggestions on things we should watch, if you like our live versions versus our non-live versions, if you like it the other way, let us know. plusplatoon@gmail.com. Please like, subscribe, share everything. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter at Plus Platoon, and we are, everywhere we need to be.
I like Ryan's comment is very true. If you want to share that.
Spoiler without context, Jim's very, very rude to the magician. Sure. Yeah. Okay. The two down who have seen it are laughing, so I'll guess sure. So, guys, with that,
that's for Office fans out there.
Yep.
Okay. So, not an Office fan either. So, guys, with that, no, just never watched it. So, guys, with that, we are going to say goodnight, and thanks for joining us. So, bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of the Plus Platoon. Be sure to subscribe to the Plus Platoon podcast to keep getting great content each week. Then head over to Apple Podcast and leave those 5-star reviews, as they help make the Plus Platoon visible to even more Disney Plus fans. Also, go to YouTube and like and subscribe to the Plus Platoon channel, where you can watch all future episodes live. If you have a question for the Plus Platoon, please send us an email to plusplatoon@gmail.com, or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @plusplatoon.
The Plus Platoon is a Disney Plus fan podcast and is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company or the Disney Plus streaming service. All opinions expressed on the show are solely those of the individual hosts and in no way reflect the views of the Walt Disney Company.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, because the Plus Platoon is to be continued.
I was about to say we'd